this session in practical management of COVID. The idea is to combine global experiences with what we are experiencing in India at the moment. Miradoc is created to as a telemedicine platform to provide healthcare to all. It is a GP-based model, which also provides super specialists, hospitals, pharmacy, radiology when required. At the moment, it is focused only on providing pro bono advice and input on COVID related issues at the moment that the country and the world is facing. Let me introduce you to the panel. We have our keynote speaker, Dr. Raj Kapoor from the US. Thank you for joining us, a renowned pulmonologist, former chair, University of Pittsburgh, at director, Restful Night Sleep at Pennsylvania, and been very, very closely associated with COVID since it started. Dr. Tulsi, practicing senior physician, former head of intensive care, Moolchand Hospital, as well as Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia. Dr. Kalra, a highly accomplished internal medicine expert, currently practicing at, among other areas, Panchsheel, Max at Panchsheel. All three have got extensive experience in working with COVID patients in person, at home, at hospitals, as well as over the
So let me begin with thanking Miradoc team for asking me to co-chair this important webinar of Dr. Raj Kapoor, who is globally recognized, one of the finest pulmonologists, and also not to forget to express my gratitude to Dr. Harsh Mahajan of Mahajan Imaging, who too is one of the best radiologists known internationally. So Dr. Raj Kapoor, that was a fascinating insight to the pathophysiology and the management of COVID-19. Let me begin, sir. So the WHO says it's a multiple variant in India, and it's a variant of concern. Why? Because it's more transmissible, increased disease severity, its ability to evade detection by viral diagnostic tools, reduced effectiveness of treatment, and probably evades natural or vaccine-induced immunity. What do you have to say on that?
Well,
Dr. Raj Kapoor?
Yeah, the variant, as you say, is increased transmissibility, and they may be causing severe disease because it may be escaping the vaccine. But the vaccine usually, even if it escapes, will cause mild to moderate disease. It will still prevent hospitalization and death.
Absolutely.
So I think there may be escape from the vaccine because of the new variant, because the neutralizing antibodies may not be adequate produced by the vaccine. But I would still vaccinate people and tell them that it will only cause maybe mild to moderate disease, which we can control with our strategy. But it will not cause severe illness or ICU admission or death.
Right. So they also said that the second wave is involving the lungs rapidly as compared to the first wave. Is it because this virus is more virulent now?
Possibly, but usually when the virus spreads faster, it is less virulent. Because if it is very virulent, it is going to kill the host.
So why are people dying more in the second wave as compared to the first wave?
Well, maybe it is overwhelming the hospital system because a lot of people got infected all at one time. So it is overwhelming our medical health system. That may be one reason. As you know, there was oxygen shortage and many other things, the medication shortage, and there was a problem with the medicine distribution. And also there may be a wrong strategy of treatment, that they're making mild disease, moderate disease, and moderate disease, severe disease, because not checking the oxygen level and not checking at what time which medicine to be given. So there may be a problem with the strategy, there may be a problem with the health system overwhelming, there may be a problem with the the medication availability, and everybody is trying to use the fancy remdesivir where it doesn't change the mortality.
Yes. So talking a little about the long COVID, Dr. Raj Kapoor. So what would be the incidence? Would it be about, say, about 10%?
It ranges from different studies. It has ranged from 10 to 40%.
Okay. And at least one cohort study said that 87% of the patients reported at least one persistent symptom like fatigue or joint pain or palpitation, breathlessness or cognitive impairment. What do you have to say about that? A lot of people reporting at least one symptom?
I would agree with that. I think fatigue is the most important. And I think it's from deconditioning. It is from, they have been through severe inflammation, and, it's a matter of recovery. The fatigue may also be because of the hypoxia that they suffered, and they become anemic, you see, because of the loss of iron. When they become anemic, they may have fatigue because of anemia. They may have fatigue because of deconditioning. They may have fatigue because of the possibility of tachycardia and orthostatic hypotension.
Right. So recovery trial and the Solidity trial said there is not enough evidence to recommend now remdesivir or HCQS or lopinavir, ritonavir. In fact, they also said interferon in hospitalized patients as indicated by overall mortality, initiation of ventilation, and the duration of hospital stay.
So you're asking about remdesivir. Remdesivir will reduce the stay from 15 to 11 days, from 7 to 5 days, and it is only effective if it is given during hypoxia. Number one. Number two, it can be combined. It can be combined with dexamethasone, and it can also be combined with a new Janus kinase inhibitor, which is a recent study with the betasinib and remdesivir combination is more effective than remdesivir itself.
Right.
So these three combinations may be very helpful. The recovery trial, of course, has been the only stay with us because it reduces the morbidity, mortality less than 28 days. And that what they used was dexamethasone. I would definitely use steroids for inflammation and in severe cytokine storm because it has a lot of beneficial effects. But I'll be very careful using it not in patients who have no hypoxia. And also, you can combine it with tocilizumab or other anti-cytokine inhibitors during the severe stage, but not otherwise.
Right.
They have not shown any very effectiveness. The most effective has been, I would say, dexamethasone, anticoagulation, vitamin D, and melatonin.
So, Dr. Raj Kapoor, how often have you been using tocilizumab? So, it's been associated with reduced mechanical ventilation and reduced IL-6. Patients admitted to ICU with high biomarkers, still not intubated, are probably the ones who would benefit.
Yeah, the person should not be on the mechanical ventilation before you give tocilizumab. And tocilizumab,
Right.
you can decide once the IL-6 is more than 100. And you can give in aliquots of doses. You can give like 100 milligram, then another 100 milligram, or maximum you can go up to 800 milligram. But the problem is that sometimes these patients are also on multiple antibiotics. And when you give tocilizumab, it causes secondary bacterial infection, and it causes secondary fungal infections, especially aspergillosis. So one has to be very careful by using tocilizumab. And one thing I have found out that most of the patients in India, they're giving at least 1 or 2 major antibiotics, piperacillin, meropenem, in all the patients with no documented infection. They're using it for protecting from steroid possibly causing secondary bacterial infection. And very interesting study came out from a doctor in Indore. He said that mucormycosis is occurring. He checked 200 patients of mucormycosis, and 100% people in that study had on 2 antibiotics. It was not steroids, it was not diabetes, it was not anything else, but it was antibiotic use. So we have to be careful in using the antibiotics, at least not if there is no need. It should be only used very judiciously, as it is also promoting fungal infection. So tocilizumab,
So
yes,
my
I will
last
use only
two
if it is indicated with high IL-6 and the patient is on mechanical ventilation.
Right. My last two questions would be first on IDSA, which updated guidelines and said ivermectin, no benefits at all. Tocilizumab decreases mortality. Patient already on steroids or on is not improving. That's the time probably you'd like to use tocilizumab. And finally, the monoclonal antibodies, they would prevent disease severity.
The monoclonal antibody have to be used before hospitalization.
Right. So
So-
can they be used at home? Because it has to be given by an
Yeah,
infusion.
they cannot be used at home because it's an IV infusion.
Yes.
So they have to go to a facility to get the IV infusion. It is given over an hour.
Yeah.
So the monoclonal antibody, as I said, will be very effective in controlling the disease. And it should be used more often than it is being used presently.
So would you also like to give this in, for example, we have a few doctors who had been vaccinated, they had received 2 jabs, still they had COVID, and probably, you know, they're high-risk patients. See, so probably you'd like to start early in them while they are still to mild to
Yes.
moderate disease.
Yes, yes. If they are high risk and there's a breakthrough infection, yeah, I would definitely recommend, and they qualify for monoclonal antibody, yes.
Moreover, these doctors didn't develop any antibody. Even after 2 jabs, probably they were on immunosuppressants. That was the reason. So here, probably you'd need
But
to give
depends
this.
what antibody. It depends what antibody you are checking, because IgM, IgG is not the answer. You have to check the anti-spike antibody.
Right, right.
And these
right.
neutralizing antibodies have to be checked. So which is not usually checked. And then
No,
they
we are
claim
doing
that
just
they are-
IgG antibodies here.
No, that is not the answer. You have to get the anti-spike antibody.
Right, absolutely. Finally, my last
And
question
then
on
even that's
ECMO.
not recommended.
Okay, my last question on ECMO in COVID-19 ARDS.
Well, when person is on mechanical ventilation for some time, and then you find that the requirement of oxygen has gone beyond 100%, patient is not saturating very well, and there is no other answer, and the patient is markedly hypoxic, this may be a solution to do ECMO at that time for the membrane oxygenation, whereas there is no other indication to my knowledge. And sometimes, you know, if it is not well managed, it can cause a lot of problems with the hypotension and then also coagulation. So I would reserve it for very, very severe cases where we are a losing battle.
So patient on mechanical
I would not use
ventilation.
it.
The patient
Yes,
on
yes.
mechanical
We'll
ventilation,
continue that. Yes.
not improving,
In addition to the ECMO, yeah.
Yeah, so that, and what is the success rate in your set of patients?
No, I personally have not used any because I'm not working in ICU presently. And
Right.
from what I've heard from other places, the mortality has been 100% on ECMO.
Right. Okay. Dr. Kalra probably would like to ask.
Sir, I'm thankful to Miradoc, Dr. Mahajan, my panelists, Dr. Kapoor, and the audience. Sir, before I ask my questions, just wanted to know from you what happened to Indian scene. It was so good in first wave. We were much better than the rest of the world. And we were giving hypothesis that it could be due to BCG, it could be due to chloroquine use, whatever. And what happened in the wave 2? Where are those factors now? What happened?
Well, they have seen that people who have BCG vaccine may have some protection. People who have blood group O have some protection, but it is not clinically seen. It has not been. It's a conjecture. It is being worked on. So I don't think the BCG vaccination could have prevented the second wave. I don't think it is related to that blood group O. I think it is the variant which is more easily spread, and it is increasingly transmissible. That is the reason that the second wave was more severe. Then more patients got infected all at one time. And also between the first and the second wave, there was a lot of relaxation on the part of the public. They were taking things that now it has passed away. It is not going to hurt us. I saw there were a lot of functions going on without a mask, without social distancing. So obviously it was an opportunity for the virus to transmit very rapidly and overwhelm. It is overwhelming of the situation and overwhelming of the health system. That is the difference between wave 1 and wave 2. It is because the variants are forming all the time, and they will continue to form because of our laxity, because of our delay in vaccination. So the basic answer is that the earlier we vaccinate, the earlier we can stop the spread. So vaccination is the answer. And sometimes, we are unable to do that. And that's the reason the second wave is more dangerous than the first one.
So based on your presentation, my first question is, as you said, fever should not be treated. This is such an inflammatory statement because nobody will like to have fever more than 100, 101 or so, because patient himself, he will change the doctor. If I say, I don't treat your fever, what you say about that?
Yes. I said, personally, I don't like to treat fever until 103. You can treat the fever more than 101.
Right. And sir, in your presentation at in one slide, ACE2 and slash was DPP4. Is this the same DPP4, dipeptidyl peptidase, which was in diabetes, or it is different? DPP4 was mentioned in one of the slides.
No, this is the receptor. No, yeah. This is the receptor at the cell. Instead of the ACE2, this is for MERS.
Okay.
So this is for MERS virus. Yeah.
So coming to ACE2, ACE2-like receptor is present like a protein in band 3 of the RBC. So does RBC also act like a vehicle or a receptor for the virus? Because it has a great resemblance to ACE2, the erythrocyte band 3 protein. So any idea, does it go into the red cells, the virus, and travel to all the destinations from one place to the other, entries from the respiratory tract?
Yeah, yes, it does. It does disintegrate the heme from the hemoglobin and creates porphyrin release, and that is the free iron release from the RBC, which is causing the ferritin to come out. Yes, it affects the RBCs. Yes. And
sir, the L type and the H type phenotypes, we were thinking there may be different type of phenotypes. So it is probably the same person from one step to the next step and to the next step, from normal to L and to the H type. The person remains the same.
Yes.
It's the staging of the disease that changes.
Yes. Yes.
And sir, one very unclear thing, remdesivir is only antiviral. And as per our understanding, after 1 week or so, hardly viruses are present there. It's the immune system which is fighting with the residual or whatever is happening. So is it so effective to be given even after 10 days, and that also for 10 days duration? Why can't it be given for shorter duration if it is effective?
It's not recommended for 10 days.
First of all, remdesivir was used.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remdesivir was used for Ebola. It's a broad spectrum antiviral, and it is not very effective against SARS-CoV-2. So what they're trying to use is as an antiviral to reduce the viral load, which is, you can do it, but they didn't find it as effective in the viral replication phase as they find if there is hypoxia. It's only when there is hypoxia it is given, then it can reduce the length of the stay from 7 to 5 days. That's about all. It doesn't reduce the mortality, it doesn't reduce morbidity. So it is optional for you to use it.
Sir, about vitamin D and melatonin, you are so vocal. What about zinc? It is being given here to everyone. So is it
Yes.
worth giving, or it has not much of benefit? And
Yeah,
also it has been
the-
blamed to mucormycosis also.
Yes.
Please.
So zinc has been overused in India. Zinc and vitamin C study, double-blind study came out in February, and they said that zinc and vitamin C are not effective for SARS-CoV-2. So zinc, if you take more than 40 milligram of elemental zinc, the tablet may have 100 milligram zinc, like zinc sulfate, but the 40 milligram elemental zinc or more is very toxic. And what zinc does is it will reduce the copper absorption and the iron absorption and will cause anemia. And it can cause severe GI toxicity. And of course, patients have been taking zinc for the last 6 months. Patients have been taking for the last 1 year. That is uncalled for, and increased zinc can promote fungal growth. So even mucormycosis can happen with excessive zinc intake. So I would strongly discourage the use of zinc. Vitamin C, if you have to use, in China, they use 25 gram of vitamin C, not 2000 milligram, and that was given IV. And the study is presently going on for the use of vitamin C IV 25 gram to 50 gram, not 2000 milligram. Zinc has been combined with vitamin C for epithelial, integrity. And the double-blind study recently proved that it does not work.
So have you used methylene blue also in your practice? It's coming up.
No, I have not gone that far.
Right, sir. So airborne route
I
is
have
now
not gone that far. I'm not familiar with it.
right. Airborne route is the
I'm sorry?
route which is more in discussion. Airborne spread of the COVID. So much so that we are now recommending use of double mask, N95 plus a surgical mask. So shouldn't we
Yes.
have some innovation in the mask itself? Although it has been tried very, say some last year also, that the N95 mask can be coated with a negative charged ions, and also it can be coated with antibodies, which can be neutralizing. So any comment on innovations or need to change our N95 quality?
They're
Especially
making
for
nasal
doctors.
inhalers, they're making nasal inhalers to contain the virus in the nose. But again, most important thing is the vaccination. And I think vaccination should be the top priority. And the innovation is, of course, there for the making better masks and everything. But still, the vaccination is the answer,
Yeah,
and the
definitely.
monoclonal antibody is the answer. You can use a nasal spray to cut down the viral load in the nose, despite the mask. That is the only other innovation I know of.
Yeah, they are coming with nitric oxide sprays anyway. Sir, my last two questions,
Yes.
sir. One is about the testing. Testing has been a mess here. The report was given 3 days, 4 days, and availability was a problem. Can't we have that breath analyzer test, which is now available, but not in commercial scale? So breath analysis that gives in seconds, a few seconds to give the result. Why they haven't been so popular? So easy and so fast.
Hasn't been validated still.
I think they're
It is
working in
available in
Israel
some of
for
the
breath
elite
analyzer.
clubs. Some of the elite clubs are having it. Anyway, sir, and saliva-based testing also has not picked up. It's a cumbersome thing to have someone else comes to take your swab. If you can give your own saliva, it takes hardly any time and it's very comfortable. What's your comment about that?
Yeah, Yale University has done the saliva test. Saliva test is same thing as antigen test you can do instead of nasal swab. But it has not become popular yet. I don't think it has been released yet.
My
You
last
can do
question
saliva
about the-
test.
Yeah, my last question is about the vaccination passport. So is it pharma based? Because some of the vaccines are debarred. So kindly comment, because all we want is a person should be not infectious. That can be tested. One may be tested for immunity. One can have it tested by whatever ways you have to test antibodies. So why to bar a person having a particular vaccine and not the other one? Any rationale?
There may be some political reasons, and also because of the vaccine effectiveness, efficacy of the vaccines are different, as you know. Different vaccines have efficacy ranging from 70 to 95% or 60 to 95%. For example, Covishield has an efficacy of 60% when it is given at 8-week interval, but it increases to 80% when it is given at 12-week interval, just to give an example. Pfizer vaccine has a 95% efficacy. Now, efficacy of vaccine is tested in the lab. That is the neutralizing capacity of the antibodies against the coronavirus, which is the pseudocoronavirus they use to check the efficacy of a vaccine. But the effectiveness of a vaccine is different. The effectiveness is different in the population. Effectiveness is hampered. If somebody is obese, the efficacy of vaccine is only 50% in obese people. If people are consuming alcohol, the efficacy is going to go down of the vaccine. If people are sleep deprived, the efficacy of the vaccine is going to go down. So people are not looking at themselves and they're blaming the vaccine for efficacy. We have to be also discipline of health that people have to have besides the passport. The passport may not be valid because the vaccine may not be effective. It may be efficacious, but not effective. So that is a very difficult thing to answer. Although it says that the person has been vaccinated, and that is helpful for travel. But again, effectiveness of a vaccine depends on the host himself.
Mr. Mathur, can you take some questions from the chat box, please?
Yeah, we have the questions. Yeah, we have the questions.
Quite a
Dr.
few, but
Yeah.
let me turn it over to the audience for a couple of questions. They are quite a bit, but we are running out of time. We have run over. One from Dr. Podar. Prashant, can you unmute Dr. Podar? If he can't unmute himself.
Yes, Mr. Mathur, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
hear-
can. Yeah.
Yes,
Please go.
Dr. Kapoor, you said mild COVID also can cause myocarditis. Those who are not hospitalized, even they can develop myocarditis. So how do you follow up these patients? What should be your criteria? Tachycardia, bradycardia, or you want a regular ECG, echo? How will you follow up these patients?
And the way the myocarditis is diagnosed is, of course, your history, and then suspicion, and then the way it's confirmed is cardiac MRI.
No, but when will you do cardiac MRI? You can't do in all patients. Patient of tachycardia.
No,
or
no. They have to have symptoms. They have to have symptoms of, they should have chest pain. They should have, tachycardia or tachyarrhythmia or something to suggest that there's myocarditis. Only then you will confirm it by cardiac MRI, not in everybody. All I'm trying to say is that 70% have been detected in a clinical study that even though they had mild COVID, 70% were detected on cardiac MRI to have myocarditis. The only way you can diagnose myocarditis is by myocardial biopsy. But short of the biopsy, the only thing you can do is cardiac MRI if you're very highly suspect of myocarditis.
Thank you. And
The common findings usually seen are RV dilatation and dysfunction to the tune of about 39% followed by LV dysfunctions, about 16%, and LV systolic dysfunction at 10%.
Dr. Kapoor, one question from Dr.
Vidya?
S.P. Kalra, one very senior doctor. He has asked about IgE levels, high IgE levels, and the vaccination correlation, especially with Pfizer vaccine. So I know one of my patient had IgE levels of more than 6,000, and he was about to be vaccinated here. So we were holding his vaccination. Ultimately, we got it done with Covaxin. What you say about that?
So the IgE level is not for a particular, it has to be for a particular antigen. So it is a total IgE. It may contain a lot of different antigens, which is causing the IgE levels to go so high. What you have to do is you have to give Xolair at least 24, 48 hours before vaccination for high IgE level. And they can be safely immunized because IgE, if it is high, doesn't necessarily mean that they will get anaphylaxis. No, it is not the IgE for anaphylaxis. It is the IgE for a previous antigen that they have been exposed to. So you can protect them by giving Xolair 24 to 48 hours before the vaccination. And then while the vaccination is being done, they should be protected and observed for 30 minutes. And there should be epinephrine available in the unlikely event that the anaphylaxis happens.
Right.
So there has been a question on ivermectin. See, let me clear that the IDSA updated guideline said ivermectin, no benefit seen. Even the recovery trial and the Solidity trial said ivermectin doesn't help. That was one of the questions on ivermectin.
Now niclosamide is coming in place of that.
I'm sure it'll go the same way.
Yeah.
We have one question from Dr. Diwan.
Yeah.
Diwan, all yours.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. This is Dr. So nice, and your lectures and talks have been so fruitful to us in the last about a month and a half that I'm in touch with this particular portal. My question basically relates to the same point that it has been just now raised on ivermectin in terms of preventing community spread in the country like India, where we have practical challenges of shortage of vaccine, and even in administration of vaccine in itself is a big effort. Time is a very, very important factor. So whereas ivermectin can be easily administered orally to a vast majority of people in one stroke as a campaign. So what is your opinion about it? And why can't it be taken as a policy decision by Government of India when we are having so much every fortnightly if ivermectin is administered by the vast majority of people? Will it not serve the same purpose as vaccine is serving? That is the question that I am raising.
Well, it can be used as a prophylaxis. It has been tested in 52 studies all over the world, and they have done a meta-analysis and they have come up with a prophylactic plan. What they do is they give 12 milligram ivermectin day 1, 12 milligram ivermectin day 3, and thereafter ivermectin 12 milligram with food every 2 weeks. So this has been the plan proposed by the people who believe in ivermectin prophylaxis and its use. Ivermectin has been out there for 40 years, and it is a safe drug. And the only problem is that when people start self-medicating themselves, then it can cause toxicity. That is the reason that WHO doesn't like to use ivermectin for any reason. Also, ivermectin has been used for, as you know, for strongyloides as well as for scabies. And the person who gave ivermectin for river blindness was awarded Nobel Prize. So ivermectin is a very safe drug. It has been used for 40 years and it can be utilized for prophylaxis, like I explained to you. And if you think that vaccination is lagging behind, then it may serve the purpose, and only time will tell. But I have no objection to it.
Some states are giving it. to all.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
So the role of ECMO in COPD patients. There's one question.
For how long?
Well,
So the role of ECMO
well,
in COPD.
that's a very difficult question. You know, I think
That's why I asked you.
that would depend. That would depend on the patient's situation. You know, as long as you think there'll be you can salvage the patient by doing ECMO, then you can use it in COVID-19 with COPD, because they will definitely get into very severe respiratory insufficiency. And there are a few cases where they have used ECMO and they have recovered. But again, sometimes they have to use it for a long time. They may have to use it even up to a month.
Yeah, I was
So-
reading the success rates appear to be about 40%. That's not bad.
Well, hats off to them, you know, whosoever is using it. And but it's not available easily, you know, in most of the
Yeah, it's
hospitals.
very expensive too.
We'll take one last question from Dr. Kiran Vinayak.
Yes, thank you so much. I just wanted to know, I've seen 2 or 3 patients of mine, they got exaggerated, their mental condition was exaggerated with COVID infection. So I just want to know how to manage them, or how do you, or you have experienced something like that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Some psychiatric problem after COVID.
Yes, after COVID, they got the mental attacks, they got, you know, they were depressed and
Yeah,
there were
that's
lots
a
of
common,
problems.
yes, it's quite common
Yeah,
that depression occurs.
Depression
Yes.
and then delusions also increased in 2 patients.
Yes.
yes, anxiety, depression can follow, mental fog can follow. And I think you will have to seek psychiatrist help.
If a
So
person
you-
has
you-
been to ICU, then ICU psychosis adds to it.
Yes, yes.
Then can we increase the dose on our own, or we have, because it's very difficult to approach the doctors these days. So as a physician, can we increase their doses, whatever they are taking?
I'm afraid I cannot answer that. You have to check with the psychiatrist.
Maybe they need some anxiolytic drugs, Dr. Kiran.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, thank you.
Okay. So, there are a lot of questions here, but we are run over quite a bit. And I'd like to thank Dr. Kapoor, Dr. Tulsi, Dr. Kalra for being with us and sharing their thoughts. Also like to thank, my founder colleagues, Ishan Singh, Vidur, and, Prashant, who's put this together technically. For questions, please do reach out to our, website, Meradoc Health, and we would be happy to get in touch with you. In any case, we would send you a link to the recorded version of this, which you will have access to right through, and some of the regular webinars we hold. And we look forward to remaining in touch. Thank you very much for being with us today.